The Citroën C4 Cactus, a typically small little SUV, and with its comfortable interior and mad air bumps on the doors, very French. But that's the old C4 Cactus, because there's a new one. There's a new corporate grille, larger, smarter rear lights, and those slabs of dairy milk on the doors have been cut down to size. The dreadfully dull C4 hatchback has died, so the Cactus is now Citroën's VW Golf rival, so wackiness just won't do. But the styling isn't the big news with the new C4 Cactus. It is, well, it's under the body. It's something you can't see, but it's something you can very much feel. It's got a brand new type of suspension system. Now, I'm going to keep this quite simple because it is a little bit complicated, but essentially Citroën has replaced the rubber bump stops that you get on the suspension normally with dampers. So there's a new damper at the top of the suspension of the coil spring and a new damper at the bottom of the coil spring. It means it can control the two extremes of the suspension far better. There's less of that typical thump, thump, thump that you get through the suspension normally if you have rubber bump stops. And because there are new dampers at the top and at the bottom of the coil spring, it has allowed Citroën's engineers to fit softer coils. So it means that the suspension is far better suitable. It means the suspension can far better deal with really severe potholes and the general road imperfections that you get on typical British B roads. Now, the reason for doing this is Citroën is trying to return back to one of its USPs. Now, way back in the mid-1950s, Citroën created something called the DS. I'm sure it's a car you're very familiar with its hydro-pneumatic suspension and soft, springy seats. The DS was in a unique class. There was no other car that rode quite like it. Citroën's new progressive hydraulic cushions suspension is not quite the return to the days of the DS's clever hydro-pneumatic system. But Citroën thinks it is a USP it can claim in the hatchback class. But that's the claim. Is it any good? And do you want to know something? It actually does work. Now, we're driving around this pretty little Provence village and there are some really big potholes, big speed humps, ripples in the road, the type of usual street furniture that you get. And this car deals with it so well. Look, there's a speed hump coming up now, and here we go. I can barely feel it. Honestly, it is a revelation. You can feel the wheels are in contact with the road, but the body seems to rise above it. It feels, and I don't want to say this, but it does feel a bit like a magic carpet. Now, it's not totally flawless, I can promise you, but really on a car that cost around £20,000, would you expect it to be faultless? I can tell you, it's not faultless in a Rolls-Royce Phantom, that's for sure. But it rides a good deal better than the old C4 Cactus and a damn sight better than a lot of cars in the small SUV class. Is this the class leader for ride comfort? It could well be. So the suspension works. Well done, Citroën, top of the class. But that's not the only thing Citroën has changed on the new C4 Cactus. Now, it's not just the suspension Citroën has been working on, they've also been working on the seats, and they look a little bit like soft mattresses, don't they? Well, they feel like soft mattresses, I can tell you, and once again, this is like a return to the old Citroën DS of the mid-1950s. But there's a huge amount of support in the small of my back and in the side bolsters here, and I think these are probably the most comfortable seats in a car this side of £40,000. Citroën has also added a new engine to the C4 Cactus. Now, it's an engine that's been around in various Peugeot, Citroëns and DS's in the past. It's a 1.2 litre PureTech engine with 128 brake horsepower, 3 cylinders and a tiny little turbocharger, but it hasn't been seen in the C4 Cactus until now. And just like it is in the Peugeot 308, the engine delivers a good amount of poke low down in the rev range, and it feels as fast as the 8.2 second 0 to 62 miles an hour sprint time. But the pick of the engines is the lower powered 108 bhp version, and if you really want a diesel, there's a 1.6. Until May, there's a naturally aspirated 1.2, but avoid it, as it's not only breathless, but it also does without the new suspension. Elsewhere, it's business as usual.
Now, Citroën hasn't decided to change the interior at all, which is a good thing and a bad thing. A bad, well, the soft touch plastics up here feel very good, but elsewhere it's just a collection of scratchy plastics. Across the top of the doors, for example, it just feels very cheap. Another bad thing, well, it's this infotainment system. Now, whilst it does look very smart, and it does work pretty well, you still don't get shortcut buttons to things like the climate control. So, whilst you're driving along, you have to start prodding away at these touch-sensitive buttons to actually control simple things like the climate control. Now, I can forgive the dashboard's shortcomings because of the design. Now, I've always liked the C4 Cactus, and the new one doesn't change anything whatsoever. Right from the glove box with its dainty little handles to the door handles down here, it just feels a little bit special. It just feels a little bit more interesting compared to the run-of-the-mill small SUV.
Citroën says this new, more grown-up Cactus will distance it from the Aircross SUV range and will align the Cactus with the next C4 hatchback. But I can't help but feel it's lost a little of its quirky charm. However, the reality is, while it has undoubtedly grown up, the new suspension and seats make the car more appealing on a practical rather than a subjective level. And while some of the car's wackiness has gone, there's still enough of the old car's appealing character still here, along with the added benefit of more comfort and refinement. Click the video window on the left for a review of the new BMW X2, and on the right for a 1,500-mile road trip in a Skoda Karoq. Click the Auto Express logo to subscribe, and as ever, thanks for watching.